Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do last unit of class 6, that is buildings, paintings and books. So let's start. Did you know that ancient Indian metallurgists made some of the greatest contribution to the world history of metals? Yes, our ancestors were amazing craftsmen. Archaeological excavations have actually shown that the Harappans had a very good knowledge of copper metallurgy. Not only that, they even made bronze by mixing copper and tin. Now, while the Harappans belong to the Bronze Age, their successors moved into the Iron Age, and that's where India really shined. India started producing very advanced type of iron, that is forged iron, wrought iron, and cast iron. One of the best examples of this is the iron pillar at Mehrauli in Delhi. Have you seen or heard about it? It's an incredible piece of engineering made entirely of iron, about 7.2 meters high and weighing over 3 tons. And guess what? It was built around 1500 years ago during the time of ruler named Chandra, who probably belonged to the Gupta dynasty. But here the most amazing part, that is the iron pillar hasn't rusted even after all these years. That's a clear proof of how advanced India's metallurgical knowledge was century ago. Now let's move on to another great example, that is building made of brick and stone. If you look at the ancient structures that have survived, you will notice something very interesting, that is stupas. The word stupa actually means a mound. There were many types. Some were round and some tall and some big, some small, but all stupas had a few things in common. At the center of each stupa, there was a small box called relic casket. It's actually contained bodily remains like teeth, bones, or ashes of the Buddha or his followers. Sometimes it even had precious stones, coins, or items they used. This box was first covered with the earth, then layers of the mud bricks or baked bricks, and finally a dome like structures was built over it, often covered with the beautifully curved stone slabs. Around the stupa, there was a path called Pradakshina Patha, surrounded by railings and gateways. Devotees used to walk around it clockwise as a mark of devotion. Both the railings and the gateways were decorated with wonderful sculptures. If you look at the map of ancient India, you will find Amaravati, and where once stood a magnificent stupa built around 2000 years ago. Many of its stone carvings still survive today and tell stories of devotion and artistry. Apart from stupas, another architectural wonder of ancient India were rock cut caves. These were hollowed out from solid rock, not only for living or worship, but also beautifully decorated with sculptures and paintings. Then came the early Hindu temples dedicated to gods like Vishnu, Shiva, and Durga. The most important part of every temple was the Garbhagriha, the innermost room where the deity's image was placed. Priests performed rituals there and devotees offered prayers. On the top of this Garbhagriha, there was a tower called Shikara, marking it as a sacred place. And building this required amazing planning and skill. Most temples also had a mantapa, that is a hall where people could gather for prayers or discussions. Mahabalipuram and Aihole are some of the finest examples of this stone architecture. Even today, they reflect the creativity and precision of ancient Indian builders. Now, have you ever wondered how these massive stupas and temples were built? Well, it was not an easy job at all. Usually, kings and queens decided to build them because it required a lot of money and manpower. First, they had to find good quality stone, then quarry it and transfer it to the chosen site and carve it into pillars, walls, and ceiling panels. Each piece had to place it in the exact position. The rulers paid craftsmen from their treasuries to create these magnificent monuments. But that's not all. When devotees came to visit, they also brought gifts to help decorate the temples and stupas. For example, did you know that the beautiful gateways at Sanchi were actually funded by the Association of Ivory Workers? Even merchants, farmers, garland makers, perfumers, smiths, and ordinary men and women contributed. Many of their names are still inscribed on the walls and pillars, showing how hundreds of people together built this masterpiece. So, next time you visit an ancient temple or stupa, just pause for a moment and imagine how many hands, how many dedication, and how much devotion went into creating that one structure. And that's the beauty of ancient Indian craftsmanship, where art, devotion, and science came together. And next, we talk about paintings. Over a century, several caves were hollowed out of the hills here. Most of them were Buddhist monasteries where monks lived, meditated, and prayed. But what makes Ajanta so special are its paintings. Can you imagine? These caves are dark inside. So the artist actually painted under the light of torches. And even after almost 1500 years, those colors are still bright and vivid. The colors were made from the plants and minerals, completely natural. The amazing thing is, we don't even know the names of the artists who created such splendid works of art. They remain unknown, yet their art continues to inspire people across the world. Now, moving on to the words of books. During this period, some of the greatest epics of India were written. You know, epics are long compositions that tell stories about heroic men and women, often mixed with the tales of gods and morals. One of the most famous Tamil epics was Silappatikaram, written by Ilango around 1800 years ago. It's a powerful story about the merchant named Kovalan and who lived in Puhar. And the story of these are not important for UPSC, so we skip here. Another Tamil epic, that is Manimekalai, was written by Sathanar around 1400 years ago. It tells the story of Manimekalai, the daughter of Kovalan and Madhavi. And these beautiful literary works were lost for centuries until their manuscript were rediscovered only about 100 years ago. Around the same time, the great poet, the Kalidasa, about whom we are already studied, was writing the Sanskrit and creating timeless works of literature. Okay. Now, let's talk about recording and preserving old stories. Many Hindu religion stories that had been passed down orally were written down during this period. These are known as the Puranas, the word Purana meaning old. The Puranas include stories about gods and goddesses like Vishnu, Shiva, Durga, and Parvati, along with how they were worshipped. And they also talk about the creation of world and stories of various kings. And what's interesting is that these Puranas were written in simple Sanskrit so that everyone, even women and Shudras who weren't allowed to study the Vedas, could listen and understand them. The priests probably recited them in temples and people gathered to hear these fascinating tales. And of course, we can't forget the two greatest Sanskrit epics, that is Mahabharata and Ramayana. It's said that Vyasa compiled both the Puranas and the Mahabharata. And yes, the Bhagavad Gita, which we have already learned about, is actually part of Mahabharata. Next one. But the storytelling wasn't limited to kings or the poets. The ordinary people also told stories and sang songs, danced, and performed plays. Some of these tales were later collected in books like the Jatakas and Panchatantras. The Jataka stories tells about the previous lives of the Buddha, and you can actually see many of the stories carved on the stupa railings and painted in the places like Ajanta. Now, let's move to the different kind of knowledge, that is science and mathematics. During this period, the great Indian mathematician and astronomer named Aryabhatta wrote a book called Aryabhatiyam. In it, he explained that day and night are caused by the rotation of Earth on its axis. He even thought it looks like the sun is moving. He also gave a scientific explanation for eclipse and found a way to calculate the circumference of circle, and almost as accurate as the formula we use today. Other famous mathematicians and astronomers include Varahamihira and Brahmagupta and Bhaskaracharya, each of whom made significant discoveries. And yes, this was also the time when Indian mathematician invented the symbol for zero. This system of counting was later taken by the Arabs, and from there it spread to Europe, and today the entire world still uses it. It's interesting to know that the Romans had a system of numbers without zero. You can try checking out sometimes, it's completely different, okay? Finally, let's end with Ayurveda, the science of life and healing. Ayurveda was developed in ancient India as a complete system of medicine and health science. Two of the most well-known practitioners were Charaka and Sushruta. Charaka, who lived around the 1st to 2nd century CE, wrote the Charaka Samhita, a remarkable book on medicine. And Sushruta, around the 4th century CE, wrote the Sushruta Samhita, where he described elaborate surgical procedures centuries before modern surgery even existed. Truly, India was a land of knowledge, science, and creativity. From art and architecture to mathematics and medicines, our ancestors were far ahead of their time. So that's it for today's class. We have completed the last part of the Unit 11, and with that, we have officially finished the entire Class 6 NCERT history. In the next class, I will start with Unit 7 of NCERT. Till then, take care and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.